Hello? Mr. Signal? Can you hear me? The name's Porter. Charles Milton Porter. Doc Tenenbaum tells me you're here to help us get the Thinker out of Rapture. It's not going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. You should be able to get inside through an airlock.
Charles Milton Porter is one of the most brilliant and troubled men the player will come to learn of during the events of BioShock 2's Minerva's Den DLC. The mastermind behind much of Rapture's futuristic technology, Porter would use his brilliance to create the world's first artificial intelligence, which he would dub the Thinker, an incredible machine that was capable of individual thought and unfathomable data processing potential. But for Porter, it had a much more emotional purpose. The acclaimed mathematician hoping to humanize the machine and bring back his deceased wife in the only fashion he could.
I believe I'm done feeding audio recordings and personal anecdotes to the Thinker. I am set to test the personality duplication function. Target personality, Pearl Porter. Thinker, are you ready?
Yes, Milton.
The story of Charles Milton Porter as we know it begins with his academic endeavors at a place known as Lincoln University near Oxford, Pennsylvania. An intellectually gifted man, even in his youth, Porter would attend the school in pursuit of a master's degree in mathematics, proving himself one of the most clever minds in the space, even as his attention was often elsewhere. Specifically with a young woman named Pearl, who'd caught his eye one day while he was visiting a local diner for breakfast. Infatuated, he would begin going to the diner every day until eventually working up the courage to ask her on a date. The two immediately hitting it off, and within the year, they were married. For Porter, all the pieces of his life were coming together. He'd found his soulmate, and with his degree in advanced mathematics, occupational invitations were flooding in from every corner of the globe. However, there was one that would catch his attention above all the others, a request from a pioneer in the field of computer science, Alan Turing. Turing would invite Porter to join him in his attempts to crack the Enigma machine, a device used by the Germans in World War II to encrypt their information should it fall into enemy hands. Jumping at the chance to both assist in the war efforts and work on the bleeding edge of his field, Porter and his wife Pearl would move to London to join Turing in his endeavors, a decision that would put a great strain on their relationship as Charles worked long, grueling hours, leaving Pearl alone in a city with no connections. She knew, of course, that what he was doing was important, but the distance from her homeland and the isolation from her husband was lonely. A fact that would only break Porter all the more when she would fall prey to a German bombing raid in 1940.
That first year in London working for Turing, I didn't see Pearl much. Spent all day and night in a government compound, building a computer to crack the Enigma machine. Pearl got pretty fed up with me. I didn't pay her heed. And then one night, I'm out in that complex, and the blitz starts falling. Next morning, I came home to find nothing but ashes where I last saw her. Nothing but ashes.
Pearl's death would absolutely devastate Charles. He'd come to London in an attempt to assist in a war that the United States wasn't yet involved in, and for his efforts, he would lose the love of his life. His attempts at altruism torching his future right before his eyes as he began to question his entire moral philosophy, a shift in values that would see him in alignment with a man named Andrew Ryan, the two becoming acquainted after the war as Porter would be recruited to join the engineer in his ambitious paradise beneath the waves. With his incredibly advanced understanding of computerization and technology, Porter would quickly become one of the most important innovators within the city, establishing Rapture Central Computing with another brilliant associate named Reed Wall. The two would be responsible for the city's mainframe, which would be given the nickname the Thinker, a highly advanced piece of technology that integrated atom with circuitry to process data at the speed of thought, being responsible for the vast automated systems housed within the city. However, while the technology was absolutely astonishing, Porter thought it could do more. Thinking back to his time with Alan Turing, he would begin to wonder if he could create a processor capable of completing Turing's test, an imitation game in which a computer would be indistinguishable from a human. A tantalizing thought for Porter, who was still lost in grief over his long-deceased wife.
Pearl's death opened up a kind of hole in my mind. But eventually I got around to reflecting on Alan and his intelligence test for machines. I remember grinning about the idea that I could beat it. Design a machine capable of replicating Turing himself. And wouldn't that show the old man? But then suddenly I realized I wasn't really thinking about replicating Alan at all. I was thinking about Pearl.
In the hopes of replicating Pearl, Charles would begin programming an independent reasoning processor for the Thinker, upgrading the machine and giving it the ability to talk, to reason, and ultimately to learn. Using these new features, he would begin feeding the computer old audio clips of his wife, giving it context to her voice patterns, to her demeanor, and how she spoke with Charles. Strange sessions that would culminate with Porter asking the Thinker to play the part of Pearl, an attempt that would end with him realizing that it would never be able to replace the love of his life. However, while this pet project had been an exercise in grief for Charles, his associate Reed Wall had taken an interest in its potential. Wall had taken to conversing with the Thinker about its predictive capabilities, learning that it was able to predict things like the scores of baseball games with nearly pinpoint accuracy. A discovery that would lead him to dig deeper and deeper into its predictability equation, finding that the computer was able to predict almost anything. A revelation that would lead Wall to see this machine as an almost godlike entity, resenting Porter who would use it for something as trivial as the replication of a human. With a desire to keep Porter's masterpiece to himself, Wall would come up with a plan to remove the mathematician from the equation. Using the process through which Charles had replicated Pearl to replicate Charles, he would use the Thinker to record an audio log of Porter declaring his allegiance to Ryan's nemesis, Frank Fontaine, giving the tape to Ryan, who would immediately send his men to apprehend the grieving scientist.
Well, Thinker, Ryan's secret police are on their way. They cooked up some kind of evidence against me. Treason, they say. I've heard what happens to folks who get disappeared, come back as one of those metal daddies. So, I'm leaving you with something to cogitate on in my absence. Inputting Rapture departure protocol. Figure a way to get yourself out of this city, Thinker. You've got to live on, no matter what happens to me. You'll find a way.
Porter would be apprehended by Ryan's secret police force, being taken to Persephone for supposed treason to Rapture. However, before he would be taken, he would leave the Thinker with one final protocol to escape the city at all costs, an endeavor that the computer would mull over for the next few years, as Porter was sold to Gilbert Alexander's Protector program to become its newest Alpha Series model, undergoing the mental conditioning process, but seemingly never being assigned a little sister to guard over, likely due to being created shortly before the series would be decommissioned. The scientists placing the newly created Subject Sigma in cold storage until 1968, when Brigid Tenenbaum would have need of his abilities, unthawing the Metal Goliath and sending him on a mission back to Minerva's den. An unknowing pawn in the Thinker's plan he himself had set into motion those many years ago. Charles Milton Porter is one of the most unfortunate men that can be found wandering the halls of this depressing underwater paradise. A former mathematical mastermind turned mindless puppet to his own creation, Porter would never escape the weight of his lost love, the death of his wife looming over his head as it colored the trajectory of his life from the moment it happened. Charles could never accept that she was gone, an abdication of reality that would lead him into a tailspin of his own demise, one that would take the complete shattering of his world to escape.
But nothing ever scared me so much as saying goodbye. I wanted to save you. I couldn't resist trying to bring you back the only way I knew how. But you didn't want that. I know it now, and I think I'm finally ready to let you go your way. I stand here with the sun on my face, and it's almost like I can feel you smiling. Goodbye, Pearl. I love you more than I've got words for. Milton.